Thank you very much. And my Lord, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and a great honor to be able to address you here today at London Metropolitan University and at the Faculty of Business and Law. We're commemorating the one and only Chancellor, the Earl of Limerick, and what a great man he was from everything that you've heard of. A legend in the city. And thank you very much to Professor Stephen Perkins, the Dean, and for your very kind words earlier. And thank you very much to the Vice-Chancellor, Professor John Raftery, who we met in fact, I think the day before you took over in an event in the River Room, the Lord Speaker's apartments in the House of Lords. And you've settled in amazingly, and the changes that you're making are phenomenal. I also want to thank Jonathan Woodhead and Karen for all the work that they've done and all the staff involved in organizing this annual event. Well, I am a very proud alumnus of this institution and also a visiting professor of London Metropolitan University and also Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, as you've heard. I chair Cobra Beer, which has a joint venture with Molson Coors, a big American-Canadian company globally and in India. And I sit in the House of Lords as an independent crossbench peer. And I want to stress on that. If you were to check my voting record in the House of Lords, probably half the time I've supported the government, and probably half the time I've been against the government. And I deal with it issue by issue. And the reason I'm mentioning this is there will be a lot of things I will be saying in my speech that will be political. And I want to assure you that the views are my own and not those of any party. I'm sure you've had quite enough of political parties over the past few weeks. And what I want to talk to you about is progress. I want to talk to you about where our country is going, where it's come from, and most importantly, the place that it's making for itself in the world. And when I came here in 1981, as a 19-year-old from Hyderabad, who traveled halfway across the world to attend this very institution, I was studying for my chartered accountancy qualification. I remember the first speech we had when we joined the course, the foundation course in accounting, with Professor Peter Cattrall, the legend. And the first lecture we had was from Lord Denning, and it was in the Jury Street building. Do we still have the Jury Street building? And I will never forget that lecture all my life, and what a great man he was. I went on to qualify as a chartered accountant with what is today Ernst & Young. It was Arthur Young in those days, and then I graduated in law from Cambridge. And it was during my time at Cambridge that I decided that I wouldn't become a lawyer, I wouldn't become an accountant, I wouldn't even become a banker. I decided instead to launch on the entrepreneurial journey. And of course, today entrepreneurship is everywhere. People like Steve Jobs, Richard Branson looked up to, and creating a business, it couldn't be cooler than it ever has been. But then, 1981 was very different. Britain was a country that had lost its respect in the world. It was known as the sick man of Europe. It was a place where entrepreneurship didn't mean aspiration or enterprise. Entrepreneurship was looked down upon. It created images of Del Boy and Arthur Daley. At that time, most Indians saw Britain as a has-been economy, an economy of the past, a country of the past. Rather than heading for the universities of this crumbling empire that our parents had left behind, most Indians set course for Boston or California. Indeed, many of my peers and friends were astonished when I decided to come and study here rather than the United States, because America was a land of opportunity where anyone could reach the top, while in Britain I would find that my background as a foreigner would leave me trapped beneath a glass ceiling. I'm sorry to say this, that in this respect, my friends and family were absolutely right. 3 decades ago, being an immigrant, being a foreigner, meant a cap on how far you could get. It was a world where, as a foreigner, let alone if you hadn't gone to the right school or the right university, you were confronted with discrimination and prejudice at every step that you tried to take. Both economically and socially, Britain was being left behind in the wake of progress. And yet, while it was a difficult time for our country, it was also a time when, faced with a junction between a brighter future and regressing further into the past, Britain fortunately made the right choice. Today, we can look back on more than 3 decades of political progress, decades under which both Margaret Thatcher and her Conservative Party changed this country, continued by Tony Blair's New Labour. We have celebrated ambition throughout that period rather than suppressing it, and celebrated enterprise and entrepreneurship. The result has been a nation transformed. Last year, I spoke at the opening of the Global Entrepreneurship Week, an event of thousands of events around the world, alongside Vince Cable, our business secretary, where it was revealed that London is now one of the top 2 cities for entrepreneurship in Europe. In December 2014, the Global Entrepreneurship and Development Institute named the UK the world's 4th most entrepreneurial nation, the highest ranked in Europe. In the past year alone, our economy has, according to Companies House, created more than 192,000 new businesses. And it's not just economically that Britain has bounded forwards. During my time at what is today Ernst & Young, there was only one partner of Indian descent. And I was assured that this was only because he had an English wife. Look around at the society we have created today, and the view is unrecognizable compared with 3 decades ago. Now, the head of Deloitte worldwide is an Indian, and with a net worth of $20 billion, the richest people in Britain are the Hinduja family of Indian origin. For politics, too, the prejudices of the past have seen a rapid decline in the time since I first came to the UK. In 2012, I took part in a photograph that was taken in Westminster Hall in Parliament, the 900-year-old building built by William the Conqueror's son, William Rufus. And this photograph was to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the election of the first 4 ethnic minority MPs since the war in 1987, including people like Keith Vaz. From just 4 MPs 25 years ago, and there was one member of the House of Lords who was a university contemporary of my mother's at Birmingham, Lord Chitness. The photograph saw from 4 MPs and 1 peer to 69 MPs and members of the House of Lords in 25 years. So I believe, in fact, and I've said this before many, many times, I believe very strongly that in my lifetime we will see a member of the ethnic minority community become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And the Prime Minister David Cameron himself said this recently, but he did add, not too soon, please. The glass ceiling is well and truly shattered. Today, Britain is a land of aspiration and opportunity, where regardless of race, religion, or background, you can get as far as you want to, and you're willing to work towards, and you're capable of. And the fact that Britain's economic progress has gone hand in hand with our country's social progress in forsaking prejudice in favor of vibrancy and diversity, I think is no coincidence. I'm a Zoroastrian Parsi, and I'm very happy to see Rusi Roshan Dalal over here. And the story of my own people reminds me every day of how great a contribution a small minority community can make when allowed to improve the lives of many. More than 1,000 years ago, a group of Zoroastrian refugees fleeing religious persecution in Iran arrived in India because there was forced conversion taking place in what is today Iran. They arrived and landed on the state in what is today the state of Gujarat, and the Zoroastrians asked the local king for refuge. But he said that there was no space in his land. One of the Zoroastrian priests asked the king for a cup of milk filled to the brim. The priest then took this cup of milk, gently put a teaspoon of sugar without spilling a drop into the milk, and said to the king, "If you take us into your kingdom, we will be like the sugar in the milk. We will blend in with you, but we will also make your kingdom sweeter." The king allowed them to stay, and that group of refugees and others who followed flourished to become India's Zoroastrian Parsi community. Zoroastrianism was the religion of the Persian Empire, which in terms of percentage of the global population at any one time is the largest empire the world has ever known. Over 45% of people on this planet were part of the Persian Empire. In 530 BC, it was ruled by the Persian Emperor Cyrus the Great, who famously created the Cyrus cylinder, a Bill of Rights that predates our Magna Carta, where we're celebrating the 800th anniversary this year, by 1,700 years. The cylinder notes the most important aspects of rule as humility and tolerance. It lays out how Cyrus's rule saw him not only protect but actively promote the many different religions and faiths that flourished in the Persian Empire, even in the territories that he conquered. And I quote, "I rebuilt sanctuaries and chapels that lay in ruins. The deities of Sumer and Akkad that Nabonidus had, to the fury of the people, brought to Shuana. I returned unharmed to their rightful sanctuaries. I've returned all the deities to their sanctuaries and restored all their temples." Today, the Zoroastrian community is tiny. In India, just 69,000 people out of 1.25 billion. And yet, wherever you go in India, everyone knows who a Parsi is. And when I took over as the chairman of the Indo-British Partnership, which is now the UK-India Business Council, of which I'm the founding chair, my Indian counterpart, Narayan Murthy, the founder of Infosys, one of India's most respected business leaders, said to me, "I have never met a bad Parsi." And as Mahatma Gandhi once put it, in numbers, Parsis are beneath contempt, and in contribution beyond compare. And over the centuries, the Zoroastrian Parsi community has excelled in every field. Today, recently, the Chief Justice of India, the Solicitor General of India were both Parsis at the same time. Maestro Zubin Mehta, the famous conductor, the late Freddie Mercury of Queen, Farooq Engineer, the great cricketer. I could go on, all Zoroastrian Parsis. And in fact, I would go so far as to say, in per capita of achievement, the Zoroastrian community is probably the most successful in the world by far. But what is most important, the community has not just looked after its own, but has always put back into the community. And it exemplifies one of my favorite sayings: it's not just good enough to be the best in the world, you've got to be the best for the world. And here in Britain, the Parsi community has become such an important part of our society that our nation's ministers are driven around in their business by cars of a Parsi-owned company, Tata, Jaguar Land Rover. When Jamshedji Tata, the founder of Tata Group, which now owns Jaguar Land Rover, set up Tata Steel 100 years ago in the jungles of what was then part of the state of Bihar, where my own company, Molson Coors Cobra, now owns one of only 2 breweries in the state, a British civil servant dismissed the idea of an Indian ever owning a steel factory. And he said that he would eat every bar of steel that Tata produced. Well, he had to eat his words. A century later, Tata Steel owns British Steel and is one of the largest steel manufacturers in the world. In public life, too, the contribution of India's Parsis has been extraordinary. Dadabhai Nauroji entered the House of Commons as a Liberal in 1892. His nickname was Narrow Marginji because he won by a very narrow margin. And in fact, then the Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury, said that no British person would ever accept a black man as an MP. The fact that Dadabhai Nauroji was fairer than Lord Salisbury is another matter. In 1895, just 3 years later, the second Indian, Manchaji Bhaunagri, Sir Manchaji Bhaunagri, also Zoroastrian Parsi, was elected to the House of Commons as a Conservative. And in 1922, the third and the last and of only 3 Indians elected to the Commons before India's independence was Shahpurji Sapratwala, or Comrade Sack, who was elected as a communist with Labour support. All 3 were Zoroastrian Parsis, 1 Liberal, 1 Conservative, 1 Labour. And I'm the first Zoroastrian Parsi in the House of Lords, and I'm a crossbench peer. So we've squared the circle. I've spoken about the Parsis because they are the community in which my own heritage is rooted. And yet they are far from the only example of the outstanding contribution of minorities to our economy and culture in the UK. From Michael Marx, the Belarusian immigrant who teamed up in 1884 with Thomas Spencer to create one of our best-known retailers, to Karl Marx, the German intellectual who found a home in London while the nations of Europe closed their doors. At our hours of greatest need as well, the role of those born overseas has been integral. Think of the Gurkhas. What an amazing contribution. This year we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Gurkhas. My father's battalion, the 2nd 5th Gurkha Rifles Frontier Force, was awarded 3 Victoria Crosses in the Second World War. I was privileged to have been brought up from birth with 2 of them, Agan Singh Rai and Gajagale. and I'm so happy that the previous government eventually recognized his contribution, allowing retired Gurkhas to settle in this country should they so wish. In the trenches of the First World War, it was not only the courage of the British-born Tommies that kept our shores safe, but also the heroism of the 1.5 million soldiers from India that fought in the First World War. Every one of them volunteers. Earlier this year, I laid a wreath, along with David Cameron and Eric Pickles, at Staffordshire National Memorial Arboretum, where 145 specially made paving stones were laid in remembrance, one for each recipient of the Victoria Cross born overseas in the First World War. One such recipient was Lance Tafadar Gobind Singh, an Indian soldier who risked his life to deliver urgent messages detailing the position of his regiment to brigade headquarters. His route saw Singh ride 6 miles across open ground on horseback, pursued all the while by enemy machine gun fire. Such acts of courage, undertaken in Britain's name by men and women from around the globe, could undoubtedly fill volumes. Immigrants from all ethnic minorities and religions have been instrumental in showing that Britain does indeed deserve to be called great. And that's not only because we're a country renowned around the world for its sense of fairness, openness, and opportunity, but because at every juncture in our history, we have, however long it has taken us, chosen the path of progress, where once we walked on a path of prejudice. We have become a country that prides itself on being secular and multicultural, where all religions are allowed to be practices, where all races, communities, and cultures coexist side by side. But there is one word I don't like: tolerance. I believe that all this should not just be tolerated, it should be celebrated. It should be based on mutual trust and mutual respect. Well, I've spoken a great deal about the inspirational achievements of the minority and religious communities in Great Britain, but none of this would have been possible without the opportunities that this great country has given us. The achievements of our immigrants creates inspiration, which creates aspiration, which in turn leads to achievement, which creates aspiration, which creates inspiration, and it's a virtuous circle that echoes across generations. That is the magnifying, multiplying, and inspiring power of minority, ethnic, and religious communities succeeding in Britain. Achievement, inspiration, aspiration. This is a tiny island, and yet upon it we have built the world's 5th largest economy, and done so with hardly any natural resources. I believe there was something discovered in Surrey or Sussex. I haven't heard much about it since. And diminishing North Sea oil and gas. The one resource that we have is our people. And among our people, it is the minority, ethnic, and religious communities who punch far above our weight. The Asian community makes up just 4% of the population of this country, and yet contributes more than double that percentage to the economy. Without their contribution, Britain would not be where it is today. The Nobel laureate Professor Amartya Sen, who I'm privileged to know well, talks about identity. He says that each one of us not just has one identity, but several identities: religious, ethnic, professional, national. When I came to this country, my father gave me some advice. He said, "Son, you're going to study abroad. You may stay on in Britain, you may live in another part of the world, but wherever you live in the world, integrate with the community that you're going to live in to the best of your abilities, but never forget your roots." I'm very proud to be a Zoroastrian Parsi. I'm very proud to be an Indian. I'm proud to be an Asian in Britain. And most importantly, I'm very, very proud to be British. And for all my pride, I look around at my country today and I see a Britain that is perhaps closer than it has ever been to turning away from its long tradition of progress. A Britain that seems ever more tempted to choose the path of regression and isolation. We now live in a nation where polling puts support for UKIP at between 13 and 15%, making it easily the nation's 3rd most popular party. For our universities, our international students, our immigrants, and for the very definition of Britishness, the ideology peddled by Mr. Farage's party is a terrible threat. Do not be fooled by those who tell you that UKIP is an ideology of reasoned Euroscepticism, that all they're seeking to do is temper the bureaucracy of Brussels. They are a party of toxic xenophobia. a party whose leader tells us that he would feel uncomfortable if a Romanian family were to move in next door to him. Put simply, they are the enemies of progress. Thankfully, Britain's voters will not elect such a man as Prime Minister even in his dreams, but that has not prevented his ideas from damaging our country. For the 425,000 overseas students currently studying in the UK, it has been particularly harmful. It's something I feel particularly strongly because I remember how it feels. I remember how daunting it was as a 19-year-old from Hyderabad in India, arriving in these shores, my nearest family 4,500 miles away. I remember how difficult it was to raise the money and how heavy a burden it was for the thousands of pounds that I had to raise with the help of my grandfather accompanying me in Bombay and standing outside those rooms when I went for my interviews to become a Tata scholar, to become a Mahendra scholar, to become a Setna scholar, to raise that money, to raise those loans, to raise those grants, to raise those scholarships. And I care deeply because I remember how welcome I was made to feel over here at what is today London Metropolitan University, by the Peter Cattralls of this world, by the inspiration of Lord Denning. I remember the lifelong friendships I made over here. Some of my best friends, Richard Armstrong, one of my best friends ever, who's sadly no longer with us, and how great a role the education I received here in Britain has played in bringing me to where I am today. And I speak not only as a former international student, but as someone proud to be an honorary fellow of Sydney Sussex College, a former Chancellor of Thames Valley University, now the University of West London, when I was proud to be the youngest University Chancellor in Britain when I was appointed, and now as the Chancellor of the University of Birmingham. As a percentage of GDP, Britain spends less than half the United States on higher education. We spend less as a percentage of GDP on higher education than the OECD and the EU averages. And yet, despite that, our universities are, along with those of the United States, the finest in the world. Ed Miliband talks about reducing tuition fees to $6,000. Does he talk about investing more money into higher education? Has the coalition government spoken about investing more money into higher education? No, they withdrew funding and then raised the fees to £9,000, and they said they would create a market. What market? Everyone has to charge almost the full fees to make the books balance. I know that as a former university chancellor, how important it is. No one talks about investing more into higher education to make this country more competitive and increase our productivity. From Bangalore to Cape Town, names like Cambridge, Manchester, Oxford, Birmingham, the LSE are bywords for academic excellence. In fact, Cambridge, my own alma mater, has been awarded more Nobel Prizes than any other university in the world. 90 Nobel Prizes. Trinity College alone at Cambridge has over 30 Nobel Prizes. Gonville and Keyes College has 13 Nobel Prizes. The University of Birmingham has 8 Nobel Prizes. One of these Nobel Prizes is Sir Venki Ramakrishnan. Born in Chidambaram in southern India, Venki studied at Yale before choosing to come to Britain to undertake research at the University of Cambridge that earned him the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2009. In November this year, Sir Venki will become the first ever Indian-born president of the Royal Society. That our universities have remained the envy of the world for so long is thanks in no small part to the millions of talented individuals like Sir Venkataraman Ramakrishnan, who over the decades have chosen to come to these shores from around the world. Indeed, of those British citizens awarded a Nobel Prize, more than 20% of them were born overseas. They came to Britain because of the excellence of our institutions and our long tradition of scientific and philosophical innovation. Yet they also came here because we're a country that defines itself not by our borders, but by our ideas, our freedom, and our openness to the world. The enormous benefits these talented individuals bring our country are not merely sentimental. They're a vital part of our economy. Recent estimates put the value of selling British education to overseas students at £14 billion, money that is thought to create more than 130,000 jobs in the UK. International students are one of our biggest exports. Most exports, you send the goods out of the country, invisibles or not. Here, we bring the students into Britain. Those numbers certainly understate the value of our university's international pull. Think of graphene, a material 100 times stronger than steel with mirrored commercial applications invented by two physicists. One Dutch, one Russian, not created in Amsterdam, not created in Moscow, but at the University of Manchester. And this is not an isolated case. A study carried out in the United States found that of all the patents registered at the country's top 10 patent-generating universities, wait for this, 76% had a foreign-born inventor. Google, after all, was created by an immigrant. The new American rector and president of Imperial College, Professor Alice Gast, at a recent event that I hosted for the Russell Group at the House of Lords, she made this point. She highlighted the preponderance of international students registering patents and involved in startups. In Silicon Valley, international students are responsible for significant job creation. Although the debate often focuses on numbers and money, we should also address the qualities international students have. Such students have competed fiercely to get where they are, and they're inherent risk takers, immersing themselves in a different world and culture in order to achieve a top education. It's therefore not surprising that so many make patent applications. And as if these benefits weren't enough, our international students also play a key role in enhancing higher education for students born in the UK. Just think how much blander, how much less vibrant our higher education communities, indeed our country, would be without the international academics, students, and graduates who flocked here for generations. 30% of academics at our top universities, including Oxford, Cambridge, and even Birmingham, are foreign-born. International students and staff make a significant economic, social, and cultural contribution to the UK. Internationalization brings a range of academic and other benefits to our universities. And when I think of what Britain means, I often think of Lancashire Street. Tucked away in a corner of West London, it is unremarkable, apart from two round blue plaques that appear upon one of the houses. On one is the name of George Frederick Handel, the great German composer. On the other, Jimi Hendrix, the great American guitarist. Both chose the UK as their home, and both left it a place that would have been less British without them. That surely is the mark of a great nation. It was Benjamin Franklin, a founding father of a nation of immigrants that came and that has come to dominate the world, who said that without continual growth and progress, such words as improvement, achievement, and success have no meaning. Learning and scholarship are at their heart about progress, about advancing our knowledge and understanding of the world. The impulse that drives the Nigel Farages of this world is the polar opposite. It is an ideology that fears the future and that looking upon progress seeks to cover its eyes rather than see the opportunity it offers. I can think of few greater tragedies than if our great institutions of education were to shun their uniquely international heritage for the blinkers of that isolationism. Every one of us would be the poorer for it. Britain would be the poorer for it. And yet it is a tragedy that the current government seems hell-bent on seeing it played out. Cheered on from the opposition benches, the coalition has imposed a devastatingly regressive set of immigration policies. Policies whose only possible outcome is the long-term erosion of our economy and our education system. To create a net migration target of tens of thousands while continuing to include students in immigration figures is both arbitrary and economically illiterate. Given that the government cannot control EU immigration, the only way to reduce net migration is by reducing non-EU immigration, which includes international students. However much the Prime Minister may say that we do not have limits to students coming to the UK, logically, by including international students within the net migration figures, it sends out the message that Britain wants to and has to achieve its targets by reducing the number of international students. To remove this perception once and for all, international students should be removed from the net migration target and classified separately from other immigrants in the way that they are in our competitor countries like the United States of America, Australia, and Canada. Indeed, even on the government's own terms, the policy has been an abject failure, with current net migration to the UK around 3 times the target of 100,000, 300,000, when it was 252,000 when the government took over in 2010. This is the product of a Home Office and a Home Secretary, Theresa May, bent on pandering to UKIP's poisonous xenophobia while turning its back on the world's brightest and best. The consequences are plain to see. With the government unable to control EU migration, students from the world's emerging economies are increasingly looking to Britain and finding the doors to be seen to be shut. In 2013, the number of overseas students coming to British universities fell for the first time in decades. And that included a 25% drop in enrollments from India, and an economy that today, year on year, is one of the fastest growing economies in the world and will be for decades to come. Our Prime Minister is fond of speaking about Britain being in a global race, yet in the rush for talent, the most important resource in our economy, we are swiftly falling behind. Take France. The government has set itself the target of doubling the number of Indian students in its universities by 2020 and is busy snapping up the very talent our Home Office is driving away. I recall a lecture in London by the Australian Education Minister, Christopher Pyne. He told the audience he wanted to thank Britain for its immigration policies because they'd driven so many students to Australia's universities. Politicians like Theresa May are dancing to the tune of Mr. Farage. While they continue to do so, we should not be surprised if the world's young engineers, mathematicians, and entrepreneurs choose to study in Brisbane and Canberra rather than London Met, Birmingham, and Cambridge. Britain should be setting specific targets to increase the number of international students, I would say by 5% a year. Not only that, we should be encouraging them to stay and work here after they've graduated. In this, once again, our government has failed us. The post-study work visa once allowed overseas students to remain in Britain for 2 years after graduation. Indeed, I'm proud to say I myself played a role in bringing this visa about. On the day that Gordon Brown became Prime Minister on 27th June 2007, I tabled a question on this very topic. Andrew Adonis was the Labour Minister answering. I got cross-party support to match what Scotland already had, 2-year post-graduation work visas, and within months we received the 2-year post-graduation visa. This gave international students 2 additional years of contributing to our economy through their hard work and paying taxes, 2 years to help to pay for their education in this country, 2 years more building the links that tie this country around the world, links that last for generations and through which investment, ideas, and influence flow. And it's a fact of which I'm a product. Were it not for the fact that my mother, her brother, and my grandfather, her father, studied at the University of Birmingham, I may not have chosen to study here at all. Indeed, I may well have gone, like the rest of my contemporaries, to the United States of America. I may never have built Cobra Beer here, never have created the jobs here, never paid the millions of pounds of taxes and revenue that it's generated, never given the happiness to the millions of my wonderful customers that I'm very grateful to. In place of the post-study work visa, this government gives overseas graduates 4 months to find a job paying £20,600 or more if they want to stay in Britain. In addition to this, they must find an employer to sponsor them, a huge procedural hurdle that is completely off-putting to overseas talent. As a result, the number of international students staying on to work in the UK after they graduate has plummeted by 88% since 2012, when the new rules were introduced by the coalition government. Now combine this with Theresa May's now abandoned plan to make African and Asian visitors pay a £3,000 bond to come to the UK, and with state-sponsored billboards telling immigrants, go home, a message that was so offensive that even Nigel Farage denounced it. How, after all this, can we be surprised when NUS polls show 51% of international students feel the British government is unwelcoming? Of course, some good policies still do exist. UK Trade and Investment's Sirius program, which I was proud to launch, sources ambitious young graduate entrepreneurs from around the world, helping them to start their business here in Britain. But its scale remains small. We need much more of these sort of initiatives. An NUS report entitled Made in the UK, Unlock the Door to International Entrepreneurs, found that 42% of current international students profess the intention to set up their own business. But disappointingly, only 14% wish to do so in the UK. Unless schemes like Sirius are encouraged and expanded extensively, we will soon find ourselves turning away the next Steve Jobs from our ports. One of the most startling facts about the question of international students is that the electorate is overwhelmingly in favor of giving students the opportunity to make their mark on our economy. In a recent national poll conducted by ICM, 75% of people were found to believe that international students should be allowed to stay and work in Britain after graduating from our universities. 75%. Theresa May and Nigel Farage are completely out of tune with what the majority of the British public want and believe to be right. In fact, we should go further and encourage the brightest students who achieve top degrees to stay on in Britain for their doctorates, and encourage PhD graduates to stay on in Britain and continue their further research and contribute to our economy and our competitiveness. In due course, they may return to their home countries, as the vast majority of international students do so, but they would have done so having contributed to our economy, continued to build the generation-long links, and become lifelong ambassadors for Britain and British universities. It's a win-win for Britain, for their host countries, and for the students themselves. Back in 2002, the then chair of the Conservative Party stood up at the party's conference and made a speech. She told the Conservatives that they could no longer afford to be seen as the nasty party. She said, and I quote her, "I want us to be the party that represents the whole of Britain and not merely some mythical place called Middle England. But the truth is that our country has become more diverse. Our party has remained the same. Our party is at its best when it takes conservative principles and applies them to the modern world. It is at its worst when it tries to recreate a bygone age. We cannot bring back the past. We can work together to make today and tomorrow's world a better place." The woman that gave that speech was Theresa May. One could be forgiven for not recognizing her words today. Since being made Home Secretary in 2010, she has spearheaded the coalition's war on migrant students. Only recently, George Osborne had to intervene when Theresa May suggested that the 2015 Conservative Manifesto would pledge to force overseas students to leave the country immediately upon completion of their degrees. It is a policy that will thankfully not come to pass, but even in her speculation, Theresa May caused substantial damage. And I quote from the Times of India, "UK to kick out foreign graduates to curb immigration." I quote from the Bangalore Mirror, "Come to the UK, graduate, and then get the hell out." The evidence of hundreds of years of prosperity is that Britain is made immeasurably richer when it extends its hand to those who wish to be a part of it. Our economy is more global than it ever has been. In the world, such a world of the tomorrow, of which Mrs. May spoke in 2010, cannot be sealing of borders since 2010 or a protection of markets. It must be embracing the openness and internationalism that has served this island so well. In chasing UKIP votes, she is chasing the very bygone age of which she warned her party. The Home Secretary has proven she is willing not only to ignore the public, but to endanger the future prosperity of our economy for the chance to posture to the far right. If that isn't nasty, I don't know what is. People once spoke of India as the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. Today, that jewel is our universities. Few would dispute the action taken by the government to disband the over 800 bogus colleges facilitating illegal immigration. And indeed, on illegal immigration, we should be doing much more. The government currently does not have any idea of the number of illegal immigrants in Britain. After years of my suggesting in Parliament we should reintroduce the exit checks removed by Tony Blair in 1998, the government has finally started to phase them in. But what the government and Theresa May in particular has done over the past few years goes far beyond prudence. I would go so far as to say that this country has made young people who come to our shores to seek opportunity feel like criminals seeking across our borders. Britain's justice system is renowned across the world because it has been taught throughout history to uphold one steadfast rule: the accused is innocent until proven guilty. When it comes to immigrants and international students, however, it feels increasingly to those who wish to come here that they are guilty until proven innocent. The hurt this does to our standing in the world is immeasurable. We are, as a nation, prone to forgetting that we're still one of the great countries and powers of the world. If you visit Imperial College's main court, you will find a tower there called the Queen's Tower, erected in 1887 to commemorate Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. At the bottom of the plaque it says, this plaque commemorating Golden Jubilee of Her Majesty Queen Victoria, Empress of India. Well, this island may longer be the center of an empire, but the hard power it commands is still formidable. There are only 5 countries in the world whose military forces are as well resourced as those of Britain, even though we don't have our aircraft carriers at the moment, even though we don't have our Nimrod at the moment, and I don't have our Harriers, we're still a formidable power. We play a leading role in the G7, G8, G20, EU, NATO, and sit as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. By any measures, Britain remains a major world player. Yet as emerging economies continue to grow, the UK's hard power will not be enough to keep us at the top table of the world. For that, we will rely on the power of our ideas, the soft power of our culture and our institutions through which we speak to the entire planet. The BBC, our music, our writers, our creative industries, our sport, where the UK with less than 1% of the global population came 3rd in both the Olympics and Paralympics in 2012. I could go on. Our most important soft power of all, though, are universities. If you don't believe me, consider this one fact. At any one time, 1 in 7 world leaders studied in the UK, including the Greek finance minister, who studied at the University of Birmingham. The former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, was a graduate of both Oxford and Cambridge. That is the kind of power that cannot be bought. It is the kind of power that only comes from a country that has spent its history looking outwards rather than falling victim to blinkered introversion. It is a unique brand of soft power, one that when united with Britain's hard power gives what Professor Joseph Nye from Harvard University once called smart power. And it is that smart power alone that will safeguard our future and ensure that our great universities continue to be our greatest assets for centuries to come. I said at the beginning of this lecture that I wanted to talk to you about progress. It is my belief that the rise of immigrants and ethnic minorities, so often educated at our world-class universities, rise to the top of every walk of British life, from politics to business, is the single greatest testament to the enormous progress our country has made over the last 3 decades. It is my belief that our nation is standing today at the most crucial crossroads that our long walk to progress has seen in many years. In the wake of the worst recession for a century, times have been hard, and the impulse of some has been to lay the blame at our immigrants' feet. In the election ahead of us, we face a choice in which the progress we have made is put at risk, however we choose to vote. In Ed Miliband, we face someone who displays a staggering ignorance of business, putting us in danger of appalling economic regression, in the danger of taking Britain back to the 1970s, returning to the stagnation and polarizing class divisions that once made us the sick man of Europe. On the other hand, we're faced by Theresa May, the Conservative Home Secretary, who's dancing to UKIP's toxic tune on the issue of immigration. Theresa May's economically illiterate rhetoric has already caused immeasurable harm to Britain's place on the world stage, something for which the Treasury, our economy, and our universities are paying a high price. How we choose to vote will matter deeply, but perhaps what will matter even more is how we, Britain, choose to define ourselves in the years ahead. We're an island nation. We must choose what we want that to mean. We will look upon the seas that surround us as a wall, keeping foreigners from our shores, or will we see them as a vista upon the world, as a highway that once allowed the greatest navy in history to connect us to every corner of the globe? I hope very much, for the sake of our economy, for the sake of our country, and for the sake of our progress, that we choose the latter. Thank you.